I remember the first time I saw them together. She looked so happy, so full of hope, her eyes shining as she laughed at something he said. They made such a perfect couple in everyone's eyes, or at least that's how it seemed. But when I took a closer look at him, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He was charming, that's for sure. Too charming, almost. It wasn't just the way he smiled or the way he'd look at her like she was the only person in the room, no. It was deeper than that. There was a coldness behind his eyes, something calculating, like he was playing a part. And I knew my friend well enough to know she deserved someone who wasn't playing games. I tried not to judge, but it was hard not to feel this gnawing sense of discomfort when he was around. The way he'd always dominate conversations, steering them to make himself look good, while barely letting her speak. It felt like he was subtly pulling her away from the people who really cared about her, her friends, her family, while keeping her caught up in his world, his plans, his life. At first I tried to tell myself I was being overprotective, that maybe I was just being paranoid. I wanted to believe that. But I couldn't ignore the small things that didn't sit right with me. The way he'd cancel plans at the last minute or leave her hanging for hours, telling her he was too busy to talk. It didn't add up, and it wasn't the kind of behavior you'd expect from someone who genuinely cared about someone else. I was there for her through all of it, always offering advice and support when she'd vent about the little things that bugged her, how he'd barely put any effort into their relationship, or how he'd suddenly become distant when they were supposed to be having quality time together. But when I mentioned it, when I told her that something didn't feel right, she'd laugh it off or get defensive. She'd tell me I was overthinking things, that he was a good guy deep down. And I wanted so badly to believe her, to support her in every decision she made. After all, she was my best friend, and I didn't want to see her get hurt. But something inside me told me to keep an eye on him, to trust my gut. Still, I kept quiet more often than not, hoping that I was wrong, hoping that she'd see the truth on her own before it was too late. But deep down, I knew I was just waiting for the inevitable, bracing myself for when everything would finally come crashing down. As time went on, those little signs started piling up, one after another, and it became impossible to ignore. At first, it was just the missed calls and the texts that would go unanswered for hours, sometimes days. She'd brush it off, saying he was just busy with work or school, but the more I saw of it, the more I realized something wasn't right. I watched her try so hard to make excuses for him, trying to rationalize every little thing that didn't quite make sense. But no matter how much she justified his actions, the truth was creeping in. It wasn't just the small things anymore. It was his behavior, his attitude, and how everything seemed to revolve around him. One of the worst parts was how he'd constantly cancel plans at the last minute, leaving her hanging, waiting for a text or a call that never came. She'd get all dressed up, excited for a night out, only for him to tell her he was too tired or had something else come up. And every time it happened, she'd try to cover it up, telling me she understood and that it wasn't a big deal. But I could see it in her eyes, the disappointment, the hurt. It was subtle at first, like a flicker, but as time went on, it became more obvious. She started to pull away from the people who actually cared about her, making excuses for why she couldn't hang out with us anymore. Slowly but surely he was isolating her, and I hated seeing it. And it wasn't just the way he'd treat her, it was how he'd manipulate her emotions. She'd tell me how he could be so sweet one moment, telling her how much he cared about her, and then so distant the next, as if he'd completely shut off from her. There were times when he'd make her feel like she was overreacting or imagining things. It was like he had this power over her, this ability to make her doubt her own instincts. I'd listen to her vent, and all I wanted to do was scream at her, tell her to wake up, but I knew that wouldn't help. I could see how much she was struggling with this emotional roller coaster. She was starting to question herself, questioning her worth, all because of him. I'd try to give her the truth, little by little, but it was always met with resistance. Every time I pointed out a red flag, she'd shut me down, saying things like, "He loves me, I know he does," and I wanted to believe her I really did. I wanted to think that maybe, just maybe, I was wrong about him, but deep down I couldn't shake the feeling that I was right. The more she defended him, the more I knew I had to stand by her, even if she didn't want to hear what I had to say. I had to be there for her, even if it meant watching her fall deeper into a situation I could already see was doomed. Then it happened. The truth came crashing down all at once, and everything I had feared was suddenly laid bare. It wasn't me who discovered it, though. It was her. She was the one who found out everything, and I could see it in her eyes the moment she called me. Her voice was shaky, almost unrecognizable, as she told me what had happened. She had gone through his phone, something she'd never thought she'd do, but something in her gut told her to check. And when she did, it was all there: the texts, the pictures, the conversations that proved everything I had warned her about. He'd been cheating on her for months with someone she knew, someone they both trusted. It wasn't just a one-time mistake. It was a full-blown betrayal. I could barely understand the words she was saying through her tears, but I didn't need to hear the details to know how much it was tearing her apart. All I wanted to do was reach through the phone and comfort her, but I knew it wouldn't help. She was in shock, lost in a sea of confusion and anger, and I could hear the pain in every word. Her trust, her love for him, it had all been shattered in the blink of an eye. But despite the anger, despite the devastation in her voice, there was a part of her that still clung to him, still made excuses for him. Maybe he didn't mean to hurt me, she kept saying. Maybe it wasn't really what it looked like. I wanted to scream at her to open her eyes, to see him for who he truly was. But instead, I just listened. I could hear the self-doubt creeping in as she questioned everything. Was it her fault? Was she not enough? How could she have missed all the signs? I could feel her heart breaking, and I couldn't do anything to fix it. I couldn't take away her pain, and I couldn't undo the damage that had been done. It felt like I was standing there helpless, watching her fall apart, knowing there was nothing I could say to make it better. In the days that followed, she kept trying to make sense of it all, going over the details in her head, trying to find answers that didn't exist. She kept asking herself why, wondering how he could have done this to her, to them. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized the truth. It wasn't just the cheating, it was the lies, the manipulation, the way he had used her love against her. And yet there she was, still in love with him, still wanting to believe that somehow things could go back to the way they were. But deep down I knew that would never happen. He had taken something from her that she could never get back: her trust. And once that was gone, everything else fell apart. Now she's stuck in this toxic situation. I can see it in the way she hesitates before answering my calls, the way she avoids talking about him unless it's absolutely necessary. She's torn, caught between the reality of what he did and the love she still feels for him. It's like a tug of war inside her, and I'm watching her slowly lose. She knows the truth now deep down, she knows what he did, and yet she still can't bring herself to walk away. I can't help but feel like I've failed her somehow. I warned her, I tried to open her eyes, but now it feels like she's trapped and I can't pull her out. She'll tell me she's thinking about leaving him, but then days go by without any progress. He'll call her, send her a text with some excuse, and just like that, she's pulled back in. I watch her convince herself that he's changed, that maybe he really is sorry. But I know it's all just words, empty promises meant to keep her in his grasp. He knows exactly what to say to reel her back in, to make her think everything is going to be okay, but I see through it. I've seen it before. People like him don't change, they just get better at hiding who they truly are. The hardest part is watching her change too. She's not the same person anymore. She used to be so confident, so sure of herself, but now she's second-guessing every decision. She's constantly worried about his next move, his next lie, and I can see how much it's eating away at her. It's like she's constantly walking on eggshells, afraid of pushing him too far, but also afraid of letting him go. She's stuck between the love she has for him and the reality that he's hurt her in ways she can't undo. I try to be there for her as much as I can, but it's getting harder. Every time I bring up the possibility of her leaving him, she shuts me down, saying it's not that simple, that she doesn't know how to let go. And I get it. It's not simple, but it's also not healthy, and it's tearing her apart. I want to yell at her to stop, to get out while she still can, but I know that won't work. She's already made up her mind. She'll leave when she's ready, even if that means going through more heartbreak before she does. It's so frustrating. I see the person she used to be, the strong, independent woman, and I want so badly for her to find that person again. But right now all I can do is wait. Wait for the moment when she finally sees him for who he truly is. Wait for the day when she stops letting him control her life. Until then, I'll just keep being there, even when it feels like nothing I say will make a difference. Where do we go from here? I honestly don't know anymore. It feels like I've done everything I can, and yet it's like I'm standing still while she's moving further away. She's stuck in this cycle, going back to him after every fight, after every lie he tells her. I can see how much she's struggling, but it's like she's trying to convince herself that this is all she deserves. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe she's afraid that if she leaves him, she'll never find someone who loves her the way she thinks he does. It breaks my heart to watch, because I know she deserves so much more than this. I've tried to be there for her in every way I can, offering advice, listening to her vent, and telling her over and over again that she deserves someone who won't hurt her. But the more I say it, the more I realize she's not ready to hear it. She's not ready to let go of him, no matter how many times he breaks her heart. I can see the self-doubt creeping in again, that voice in her head telling her she's not enough, that she's asking too much from him. It's like she's forgotten who she is, who she used to be before he came into her life. Every time I talk to her, I try to make her see that she doesn't have to put up with this. I try to remind her of the strong, independent woman she once was, the one who didn't settle for less than she deserved. But it feels like she's forgotten all of that. She's so wrapped up in trying to fix him, trying to fix their relationship, that she's losing herself in the process. I just want to tell her that it's okay to walk away, that she can find someone who will love her without all the lies and the pain. But it's hard to say that without sounding like I'm pushing her away. She's not ready to hear it, and I know that. All I can do is wait. Wait for the moment when she finally opens her eyes and sees him for what he really is, a man who used her, manipulated her, and broke her trust over and over again. I hope that someday she'll be strong enough to walk away, but until then I'll keep being here for her. Even if it feels like I'm just watching her slip further into this unhealthy relationship, I can't give up on her. She's my best friend, and no matter what happens, I'll always be there to pick up the pieces when she's ready to leave him behind. I just hope that day comes before it's too late.